What is the spookiest thing you have ever encountered in real life? In 6th grade, I called my mother to inform her that my father was on his way to drop my younger sister and me off at the divorced parents' house. When she answered, I said, "Mama," and my mother quickly inquired, "My name is you," and I replied that I was. She asked me where I was, and I replied that it was Daddy's house. We were going to return home, so I just wanted to let you know that I loved you, Mama. She asked me who my father was, where I was, and how I was doing. I was obviously perplexed, so I simply said, "Mama, I'm fine. I'm all right. I love you." She attempted to persuade me to stay on the phone, but I just hung up. Later, I received a call and a visit from the police, who revealed that I had unintentionally phoned the number of a woman whose daughter shared my name and had vanished. Everything was resolved fast, but I always assumed it wasn't a mistake, that I had called the incorrect number. Perhaps it was the woman's daughter waving farewell. That is a really bizarre coincidence. Do you recall what occurred with the other girl? Or were you too young? I didn't think about this much as a child. It wasn't until I was older that I did and understood the importance of what had happened. I work as a police officer, and one night there was a gas explosion in one of the block's apartments, so we had to evacuate. I was sitting in one of the houses where an elderly man let us rest, so we wouldn't freeze outside or spend the entire night in the car. I was quite exhausted and fell asleep. People remain around the block at night to watch over the goods, because some houses were left open in a rush. After about 40 minutes of sleeping, I get a call from my partner urging me to evacuate the building because the gas is leaking again. I get up, get my belongings, and head outside to find everyone searching for me and my partner running to me, wondering where I was. I'm a little taken aback and show him my phone to prove that he called me, that I responded, and that we even spoke. But when I reach my phone, there are no answered calls, only missed ones from roughly 10 different persons, and I still don't know how I answered and spoke with him. That if I had continued to sleep in that gas-filled chamber, I probably would have died there instead of having an air hallucination. But whatever woke me up saved my life. One afternoon, I was riding the train home, and an elderly guy was seated. He turned around and asked for directions to the hospital, and I informed him which stop to get off at. Eventually, his stop came, and he got up to go, but not before turning and saying, "Thank you. I'll see you later." I replied, "Yeah, no problem," and he repeated it. I thought it was a little strange that he was so insistent on seeing me around. But whatever the strange thing is, he looked me in the eye when I said, "I'll see you later." He then got off the train and hobbled away with his cane. 5 minutes after getting on my bus, I heard a voice that sounded like the elderly man. I looked out the window and saw that he was at the bus station, wearing the same clothes, hat, and cane. I knew it was the same man, but given his pace of walking and the bus SLT train routes that were available at the time, my train was the only one that had just arrived at the bus station, so I had no idea how he got there. Did you speak to him again? Perhaps someone was observing you. But there were no buses from the hospital that went to that bus station at the time I did. I definitely should have, but I was so confused by it that I kind of froze. Every time I think about Groundhog Day at random, I see it everywhere. People talk about it. Radio stations play it, and I can't help but think about a weekend getaway. The last night we were there, we were watching TV in our hotel room when an episode of Supernatural, which I believe has the music House of the Rising Sun before awful things happen, came on. Friends took us there, and we kept hearing it until we started to notice it. I had a dream about an old friend that I hadn't spoken to, seen, or heard from in approximately 2 years dying, and I went to his burial. I woke up and realized that we were all a little stoned, so we were all freaked out again when we heard it on the trip home. I thought, "Oh, that's weird," and checked his Facebook to see what he was up to. He had disappeared a few days before, but his body wasn't discovered until more than a year later. Oh, that's scary, right? I had someone advise me while he was missing to share my dream with his mother. Seeing them continue their search for that year was difficult, but I could never do that since. Of course, the whole thing sounds ridiculous. When I was a teenager, I had an unhealthy emotional attachment to a certain musician, but I wasn't smitten with him. I had a dream one night that he died, and I woke up about 5 minutes before my alarm clock the next morning, reflecting on the scenario and feeling relieved that it was only a dream. It was more like he was my therapist, a father figure or something. I was 7 years old or so when I lost my job in a dingy apartment with my girlfriend, and the first thing I heard was that this specific artist had recently passed away. It was a little unsettling, and I got strange comments on the TV's subtitles, reacting to what I said earlier in the day and other things. Even my girlfriend saw it and didn't comprehend a word I could say out loud, and the person on TV would either act as though I told him or look around for a camera, microphone, or something similar. Subtitles would ask, "Are you looking for a camera behind this for real?" Which was really scary. I didn't care if you thought I was crazy, but then my girlfriend would have been in the same situation as me anyhow, so I moved. Fortunately, it was all gone. This one gives me goosebumps because I've had similar experiences when high or tripping. 1 month of this was the strangest thing ever. I wasn't even drunk or intoxicated. It even returned with things I said in my car or at the grocery shop, and even now when I was a little child, maybe 6 or 7 years old, my family purchased a pet hamster SL Gerbil SL. I remember playing with him the first day we received him, going upstairs to bed, and then falling asleep and waking up. My parents told me we had the pet for a year before he passed away, and I absolutely have no memory of that entire year. All I remember is a hamster falling asleep. I was devastated to see him dead when I walked back downstairs. Thinking about it is euphoric. Recently, someone posted on Reddit about a man who woke up in a lake without any memory of the previous 5 years or a clue how he got there. Another person responded that this is an odd occurrence that occurs wherever we go. In essence, we continue to live our lives while dormant inside our own bodies, but ultimately we wake up, and it seems like 5 years have passed in 5 minutes without any memory of what transpired. I was having really detailed nightmares, each of which began where I informed my parents about my dream from last night, and I wish I had recorded it in a dream book and dated it. A few weeks later, I was at a concert when I began to have déjà vu. My dreams were happening right in front of my eyes. I turned to my friend. A girl with blonde hair will come by us crying because she lost her pals in the crowd, and I will calm her down and allow her to stay with us until she feels better. 5 minutes later, she will go, "I've been here before, guy." She looked precisely like my fantasies, and the words I said were exactly what I had envisioned. She stayed for a few minutes, stopped crying, and calmed down before vanishing into the crowd. My friend, who was there the entire time, I was so terrified by this premonition that I requested if we might leave the concert early. I still get déjà vu every few days, but I've never been successful in making a prediction. I'm not sure if I believe in special powers, but that experience completely altered the way I view the world. Something similar happened to my grandmother, who had a recurrent dream of strolling down a street and standing for a while in front of a building before entering and admiring the paintings and furnishings. I believe there is a malfunction in my dream program that allows me to glimpse into the future. And then there was a door every time she went through it. She woke up before she could see what was behind it. The first time she went to Europe, it was in Germany, Austria, or somewhere similar. She was on a museum tour when she suddenly recognized it when they came to the museum. It was the same building she had dreamed about, and every room was just what her dad had imagined it to be, right down to the door, which she never crossed, and in the most anticlimactic way imaginable. Nothing happened when she crossed it. There was only more museum, and she went on with her tour and trip without any issues. When my mother called to inform me that my grandfather had passed away, I assumed she meant to say that my father, who goes by Papa, had passed away. I started crying uncontrollably, and I was too ashamed to confess that I believed it was my dad until I realized it was actually Grandpa. I contacted him later and informed him, but he simply laughed. 3 weeks later, my dad passes away, and I also believe that I misheard him. Was the universe preparing for me to lose him? It was strange because I feel like I've lost him twice, and I'm still waiting for someone to tell me that it was all an accident and that it was someone else's edit. I feel horrible because I haven't given it much thought. Grandpa, since my father went away, my grandma has been going through the worst because she lost both her husband and son in the same month. I experienced a similar situation when I received a call from a friend's mother expressing her sorrow over my father's death. I left work early and contacted him, but when I phoned her back, she apologized and said it was another buddy of the same name whose father had died 6 days earlier. I then got a call saying he had died overnight, and I was just waiting to hear that it was all a hoax. I then went to call his phone once more and nothing, but I'm happy that it did give me the opportunity to connect when I never would have. When I was a child, my family was at my grandparents' house. They had a pool in the back, and we were swimming while our parents ate on the porch. Being arrogant and overconfident about my swimming skills, the cunning 8-year-old chose to go into the deep end, where I was not yet permitted. I went underneath and touched the pool's bottom, staying there for a little while before sensing the need for air and beginning to swim upward. But I took a breath, and strangely enough, it seemed like I had taken in air. I realized that I needed air much more urgently than I had previously imagined. I felt my lungs burning, and I told myself that I needed air now while I was still another 1.5 feet deep surface and attempted to cough out whatever water was in my lungs. But nothing came out. At the time, I didn't think it was strange, but now as I think about it frequently, I understand why everyone responds with "rip" to their inbox. Thank you to everyone for my most liked remark to date, or something similar. Happened to me when I was around 5 years old. I was playing in a pool with my grandparents on vacation. When I got into deeper water than I thought I was in, I was unable to push up from the bottom quickly enough, so I stalled out somewhere in the center and was unable to touch the B-bot. Additionally, I was unable to pull myself up because I was not a good swimmer. I felt like my lungs were burning because I was in dire need of air, and when I finally inhaled, I got air instead of water, and bubbles that had previously been present vanished as I was the only person in the pool, which I wasn't even meant to be in. And I was reminded of it a few years later when I was playing Sonic the Hedgehog on the Sega. He had a feature where he could go underwater and breathe air bubbles to stay alive. I genuinely believed I was the only person who had ever gone through this, so it is reassuring to know I am not alone. The pool was unattended, nobody knew I was there, and my grandfather discovered me a short while after I exited. I probably should have died. I was 8 years old when I went inside to urinate while working in the yard with my mother. We were doing the spring planting in the flower beds surrounding the house, and even while this may not seem spooky, I can assure you that the experience was break, and I had to cross the living room on my way to the restroom. I went through the kitchen and into the living room, where I looked up to see my sister sitting on the couch. She was dressed in her school uniform, and she was staring at. What makes this a glitch is that my sister was hundreds of miles away at boarding school, not helping us plant flowers, and definitely not sitting at the edge of the couch giving me a blank stare, my little one. I never said a word, though, and nothing particularly out of the ordinary happened. When I was 8 years old, one night as my dad was tucking me in, he said good night, and I said goodbye. He then said to me good night. The 8-year-old then turned around and locked himself in the half bath until he got the nerve to go back through the house and continue preparing hostess. I'm sorry for your loss, and that's scary as hell. Thank you. I said goodbye, and we laughed. It was simply an accident. My brother discovered him dead in the living room the following morning. He had a heart attack in the middle of the night, and he was 48 years old. Though I'm not superstitious, I've been a touch spooky ever since that day when something similar happened with Abraham Lincoln, and it still gives me the chills to think about it now. 2 weeks to the day, every night before his murder, he would say good night to his bodyguard, but the night before he was killed, he said farewell instead. And I was outside at 2 in the morning, examining my phone and hearing I was listening to music on my headphones and was totally lost. I was going to cross a street when I turned in the wrong direction to see if a car was approaching and whether the light was green, because I was in the middle of the road and a car is essentially a meter. A split second later, I nearly fall off my feet since I was anticipating the collision and bracing for it. When I opened my eyes, I find that I am about 10 feet away. The last thing I see are the screaming headlights directly below my knees and the horn blasting through my music. Away from the road's edge, the song had changed. The traffic lights were green, and I could see the red taillights of a single car heading down the road. My pulse was racing, so I had to sit down for a bit, and when I got home, I started reading about near-death experiences, and I came across the concept of quantum immortality. I'm not sure whether this further confused me, but it goes something like this. If you die in one parallel world, your consciousness continues to exist in the ones where you live. This idea made me even more devastated. I think the most likely explanation is that you probably barely avoided getting struck by the car, and the real malfunction was your adrenaline-stupefied brain entering such an odd panic state that you had to be buried by my mother in my original universe rather than dying. It's still eerie, but not nearly as much as some of the other ones. I was at Burger King and playing in their small playground area when I had a half-minute memory lapse. Odds start happening in perceived near-death circumstances. I would say that the term stairs applies to all of the tunnels, although I do remember walking in circles in one tunnel for about 4 or 5 rounds before I stopped and asked myself, wait, why am I going in circles? And then I continued and discovered that the tunnel didn't go less than a minute ago. I was traveling around and about in the same tunnel over and over again. So I went back and walked through it again and reached the top again. It felt like a time loop that broke, but perhaps I was just young. When I was 9 years old, I had a similar experience at a McDonald's playground where I continued sliding down slides in an attempt to reach the bottom, but I wasn't paying attention and was simply leaving the tunnel and going back in. I was a dumb child, but this truly worried me. Could go, but none of the slides were bringing me any closer to the bottom. I felt hopeless and in a maze until my babysitter sent her child up to retrieve me, and all the slides miraculously worked. In the mid-1990s, I dreamed that I had visited my cousin. Her family was grieving over the death of a family member, and I brought it up to my wife. She suggested that I send my cousin an email to inquire after their well-being, so I did. They reside in separate states. She mails me back the following day to say, no, I am not being silly. An uncle of her husband's had died recently, and they were very close to him. I had this dream explaining the dream, but I'm probably just being silly. One night when I was a teenager, I yarosed to use the restroom, and as I glanced down the stairs from the hallway, I noticed my brother, who was 14 at the time, passing the downstairs corridor on his way from one room to another. I recognized him because of his gait and his then longish hair. I thought it was strange and out of character for him to be out in the dark at that hour of the day, but I didn't think much of it and went to the restroom the following morning when I asked him what he had been doing the previous day. The baggy jeans shape was the mid-00s. He said that he never went downstairs that night, and as far as I'm aware, he never does. He also implied that I observed him sneaking out, and he lied when he stated that we were dull, well-behaved, homeschooled children who told each other everything and were on the same page. I could ask him today if he ever snuck out, but he's 28 now, so I'm even less sure he'd lie because it happened so long ago. Something quite similar happened to me when I was a child, maybe around age 5 or 6, and I was lying in my parents' bed, watching TV. I lay there by myself watching whatever was on TV because my mom was in the next bathroom and my dad was out of town. I turned to face the hallway and saw my older brother stroll by the door as clearly as day. Down the hallway to his bedroom, my mother emerges from the restroom, and I ask, "Hey, did Mario come home?" He simply passed by. No, my brother was spending the night at a friend's house, and he hadn't been home for hours. I'm not sure if my mother was simply following my instructions. I have no idea what I saw or whether it was really my imagination. But we walked downstairs to examine the rooms and down the corridor, and there was no sign of him. The next day, we asked him if he had visited the house for any purpose, and he denied it. Since sharks were my favorite animal and my father recently passed away, the last thing we did together was set up a 13-gallon fish tank on a shelf on my wall. When I was 13 years old, He got me red-tip sharks to put in the tank sometime soon. I moved the rocks and plants about till there was about an inch of water in the tank. And when I woke up one morning after he passed away, I noticed that there was not a drop of moisture in it. The fish had obviously perished, but I cleaned it numerous times, which took days to dry out. I still don't understand how that's possible given that there is no evidence of water anywhere. I had a dream about a co-worker who liked dogs and would always ask me to show her my GSD Labrador. Anytime we spoke at work, in the dream, she was sobbing on a couch, a highly emotional dog. She runs to anyone she believes is depressed, which is precisely what she did in the dream. My co-worker smiled at me and said, "Thank you for sharing her. I felt better today." But the following day at work, I discovered that my teammate had tripped. I once had a co-worker who I had a major crush on. She would just generally flirt a little bit, but nothing ever occurred. We were more like work spouses than lovers. The dream still terrifies me when I think about it. It was so vivid and clear. She sent me an early morning instant message asking me to come talk to her because she had a dream about me that sounded really urgent. We worked in different departments, but occasionally ended up working on the same projects together. At first, I believed that this was really going somewhere, but the expression in her eyes told me that she was very uneasy. It turns out that the entire dream was for nothing. I was a camp guide taking her around a national park or something. Since our interactions had evolved throughout the course of the following week, she was certain that it was genuine and was searching for places online to see if I had ever been there. She was worried that I had invaded her dreams in that way and was still having trouble believing that it hadn't happened. Actually, my sisters and I were making a Target run 40 minutes away before my middle sister's bachelorette weekend. We returned the items to the van, and I made the decision to go to Nordstrom's to look at some makeup. But when we got back to the car, we couldn't locate the car keys in my oldest sister's purse, which I wouldn't even call a purse, which is more like a clutch with 3 pockets. She emptied everything out and replaced it. My middle sister and sister-in-law followed suit, searching the car around Target and Nordstrom's, but finding no keys. My middle sister became quite anxious because we were already running late for her party, so she called Uber back to her house to get her car so that we can at least get our belongings out of it. A technician comes out to produce a duplicate key using the lock. After the spare is made, my brother-in-law arrives to drive it home, and we head out in my middle sister's car for the bachelorette weekend. When we're all home, my oldest sister calls and claims that the key was in my handbag the entire time. I say, "There's no way," as we all examined your purse, and she was moving her belongings into her larger daily purse when she stopped abruptly. The 4 of us may have been in a serious accident, or something worse, but in our family, we believe that everything occurs for a purpose, and that's why we weren't supposed to be driving at that precise moment. If I had absolutely thrown everything out and crushed the purse entirely, I would have felt it because it had a large sphere-shaped cocaine on it, which I knew to be there. But I can't explain the slight tear in the seam that allowed the key to be hidden in the fabric. In the summer, while I was living with my grandmother and my brother was coming to visit me while I was in college, we spent the day at the neighborhood pool with my cousins and made the decision to all go out, check the seams, because that is what occurred with my mom and her job keys. We went to my cousin's house to drop them off because we had some common friends that evening. My grandparents were there, so we stayed for a little while before heading out to get ready for the evening. My grandparents said they would be home soon, so whatever. I go home with my brother, and we stay in a basement room with a bathroom while my brother is getting clean and showered. I haven't had a chance to have a shower yet. Suddenly, the dogs start barking upstairs, and we hear the garage door opening, and then the garage door opening into the... Before I even enter the restroom, my brother says he's going to head up and chat with some grandparents while he waits for me. When he returns, he looks terrified, and the dogs are lying down. The house opens, and we hear people talking and moving around. My grandparents were present, and even though I'm an atheist, we both heard it happen before it actually happened. The garage was deserted, and no one was home when he was telling me this. We heard it again, precisely like before, when I was 30 years old. I had a vivid dream about a little girl I had never seen before, but who I knew in the dream. We strolled together for a while, and she led me to a cemetery, where we stopped at a gravestone with the child's name. The next day, I visited my parents' house, and I was a baby when my cousin died in her cot when a fire broke out in her room. And I don't know her name because we don't talk about her often. But my mom told me that yesterday was the anniversary of her passing. It was strange when my grandmother passed away. I dreamed that I was visiting her in a lovely, clean house with lots of sunlight, and she was preparing sweets. She assured me that she was okay, but I can't recall her name from the headstone. Pleased and not to worry about her. I had a dream when I was very young. The specifics are a little heightened for narrative purposes, but the essence of the dream remains the same. I was wandering around my neighborhood when my best friend's mother. One of the few features of the dream that I can still clearly recall is that my friend was jogging toward me in a slim white dress with blue floral trim sewn down the hem, collar, and sleeves. Oddly, she wasn't wearing any workout attire. I continued to wander around my neighborhood, which was rather regular save for some construction in the center. Instead of building up, they were excavating a huge pitfall that was almost a kilometer deep, with many mutilated animals, the bodies of individuals who had fallen, some of whose faces were pale and blank, others whose limbs were broken and twisted at strange angles, and some of whom had been so much lacerated that I could not recognize them. My blood ran cold when I realized that they were all wearing the same white dress that I had previously seen my friend's mother wearing. I don't recall this portion, but I immediately started a desperate hunt for my friend's mother. When I was 9 years old, I had this dream for the first time, and each time it happened, it was a little different. The last thing I remember from the dream is that I did eventually discover her hanging from a rope halfway down the pit, swaying side to side in an invisible wind. Sometimes the persons in the white gowns were shape-shifting aliens, but the conclusion was always the same. My friend's mother hanged herself when I was 10 years old. This happened sparsely at first, but more and more frequently with time. My buddy moved away from the fan in her apartment, and the subsequent deaths of the people I knew in the pit, my dog, my grandfather, and my aunt, meant that I, at the age of 9, unconsciously observed some of the psychological symptoms of her depression and conveyed them in a dream. Or perhaps it was that I have additional questions. It sounds like a terrible nightmare to experience when you're 9 years old. But the strange thing is that I never felt particularly afraid throughout it. Did you have the dream after your friend's mother passed away? Once she did, I stopped having it. But I don't believe I'll ask because you've got me intrigued now. Was she wearing the dress when she committed suicide? Did you tell anyone about your dream? Would it have changed anything if you had? Were the other deaths also connected to depression? No, she wasn't. I told my mother that the dress in the dream was more symbolic. It represented those who were going to die, but she and I both believed it was a dream. I omitted the hanging part, but I doubt it would have changed anything because I was only a child with a stupid imagination. Nevertheless, most of the other fatalities were due to old age. The dress and the dream just marked them as dead, passed away soon after in the real world. Thank you for responding. I assumed you possessed a relationship with those who were. I wish you never had to be depressed. Encounter something like that once more. I wasn't emotionally mature enough to digest everything that was going on, so it didn't have a big impact on me. It took a while for me to comprehend and regulate my emotions, so I was all right. I'm a little afraid, but okay. But thank you. I really hope so.